This happened 2 years ago, on Halloween night, 2023. I'm a 25-year-old male now, but at the time, I was 22. It had been a long day at work because of a festival we hosted, where parents brought their kids to the center for all sorts of activities: competitive games, a costume contest, trivia for candy, and even a kids versus parents dodgeball match. It was fun, but absolutely exhausting. For context, I'm a community worker. Organizing events like that is part of what I do, but trust me, it drains you. Anyway, after everything wrapped up, I went home, ready to crash for the night. About an hour later, around 6 something, my little sister called me. Her name's Savannah. She wanted me to take her and my nephew Jackson trick-or-treating because neither our parents nor Jackson's parents felt like going out. And, as always, it fell on me to be the cool big brother who makes it happen. Savannah was 15 at the time, and Jackson was 11. Even though I really wasn't in the mood, I got up, threw on some clothes, and headed to my parents' house to pick them up. When I got there, Savannah was still finishing her costume. She was dressed as Raven from Teen Titans, complete with white makeup for that ghostly look Raven always has. Jackson was dressed as Sub-Zero from Mortal Kombat. Once Savannah was ready, we got in the car and drove to a busy neighborhood, the kind where you know you'll get good candy. We went house to house, and everyone we met was friendly and generous. One older man even gave them each a hot dog and a soda. He said he never handed out candy on Halloween. Instead, he grilled food because, as he put it, kids need protein. It's better for the body. Honestly, we need more people like that. We passed tons of other kids, and some complimented Savannah's and Jackson's costumes. I saw a few impressive ones myself. People really went all out that year. After hitting the last house, we started walking back to the car. It was about a 10-minute walk since we'd gone pretty far down the neighborhood. The streets were quieter now. Most families had already gone home. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. Across the street, in a dark yard with no porch light, stood a figure dressed in all black. I almost missed them completely, but I always pay attention to my surroundings. The person was wearing a hooded cloak and a mask, completely hiding their face. I couldn't tell if it was a man or a woman, but one thing was clear: they were watching us. I told Savannah and Jackson, "Stay close to me. Don't stare. But there's someone across the street, acting strange." Jackson laughed, thinking it was just someone trying to scare trick-or-treaters. But Savannah looked uneasy. For context, I was carrying a backpack with my Glock inside, and Savannah knew that. So when I told them to stay close, she could tell I was serious. Jackson, being younger, had no idea. As we walked away, that figure didn't move, but it felt like their eyes followed us the whole time. The closer we got to the car, the heavier the tension felt in my chest. Then, suddenly, I heard it. Heavy footsteps. Behind us. Boots hitting the concrete. Getting faster. I turned around and saw that same person again. Same outfit. All black. But this time, I could see much more clearly. They were wearing a tactical vest, combat boots, and black pants tucked into the boots. Their face was completely covered by a tight spandex mask. No skin visible at all. That's when the situation stopped feeling creepy and started feeling dangerous. When you see someone dressed like that, one thought instantly hits you. They're armed. He's following us, I whispered to Savannah and Jackson. Then, as calmly as I could, I said, "I need you both to listen to me very carefully. Don't stop walking. Don't look back. The person I told you about earlier, they're behind us right now. Just stay calm and keep moving. I mainly said it for Jackson's sake. He was younger, and I didn't want him to panic. Savannah, on the other hand, knew exactly how serious this was. We kept walking, trying to act natural, but every few seconds, I glanced over my shoulder. The person stayed the same distance away, still following. When we finally reached the car, they were still coming. That's when I made a bold decision. I pulled out my Glock, turned around, and pointed it straight at them. "Why are you following us?" I shouted. The figure froze. Their hands went up slowly, like they hadn't expected me to react that way. Then, they began to remove the mask. It was a woman, probably in her 30s. She stood there silently for a moment, staring at me with a blank expression. I tightened my grip on the gun and repeated, "Why are you following us?" She finally spoke, her voice flat and mechanical. "I'm an undercover cop. I was told there was a break-in nearby, so I came to check it out. That's why I was outside that house. But when you looked at me suspiciously, I assumed you were the one who did it. So, it would be wise to lower that weapon before I arrest you for threatening an officer of the law." Her tone didn't sound right. It didn't sound human. Still, I hesitated, then slowly lowered my gun. I didn't want to risk getting arrested or ruin the kid's night, but her story didn't make any sense. If she was responding to a break-in, why was she standing away from the house, staring into the street? How did my funny look make her think I was the suspect? Why would I break into a house and then casually walk around with kids in costume? And most of all, why was she wearing a cloak over tactical gear? The questions ran through my mind in a blur. I asked her, "If you're really undercover, why wear tactical gear? Wouldn't that kind of defeat the point? And what's with the cloak?" She didn't answer. She just stared, expressionless. Then, slowly, her eyes narrowed. Something changed in her face. It wasn't blank anymore. It was malicious, like she was annoyed that I didn't believe her and was deciding what to do next. Savannah and Jackson stood completely still. No one said a word. Then, she smiled. It wasn't a normal smile. It was cold, twisted, almost amused. And then she said, "If you didn't have that gun, this night would have ended a hell of a lot different for you." Before I could respond, I saw movement behind her. 4 figures stepped out from between the houses, walking straight toward us, all of them in tactical gear. No cloaks this time. My heart dropped. "Get in the car," I said, keeping my eyes on them. "Now." Savannah and Jackson obeyed instantly. As soon as they were inside, I jumped in, locked the doors, and hit the gas. As we sped off, I glanced in the rearview mirror. The woman was still standing there, smiling. The others, 3 men and 1 woman, watched silently. Their faces were blank, empty, like they didn't even have souls. The entire drive back was silent. Nobody spoke. I think we were all in shock. When I dropped them off, I made sure they got inside safely before heading home myself, still trying to make sense of what had happened. But one question wouldn't leave my mind. Why us? There were dozens of families out trick-or-treating that night. Why did they choose to follow us? I wish I could say that was the end of it, but it wasn't. A few days later, I got a text from an unknown number. No message, just a photo. It was a picture of my car, taken in the parking lot of my apartment complex. That's when I called the police and told them everything that had happened on Halloween night. They took my report, but the police said they couldn't investigate unless a direct threat was made. Typical. Out of curiosity, and maybe stupidity, I decided to go back to the same house where I'd first seen that woman. A man in his 40s answered the door. I asked if they'd experienced any kind of break in on Halloween night. He looked confused and said, "No." He explained that he'd gone to bed early because he had work the next morning and hadn't noticed anything strange. When I told him what I'd seen, he just stood there, baffled. He had absolutely no idea what I was talking about. I thanked him for his time and left. But by then, I already knew that undercover cop a story was a lie. Still, I needed to confirm it for myself. Whoever that woman was, and whoever those people with her were, they somehow knew my phone number and where I lived. That realization chilled me. It made me wonder, was that really a random encounter? Or had they been watching me for a while? Were they planning something that night, and me being armed ruined it? Those thoughts messed me up for a long time. I became paranoid. I started therapy and installed a Ring camera at my front door just to feel safe again. In case you're wondering, no, I haven't been contacted by any unknown numbers since. Nothing's happened after that picture, but even 2 years later, I still think back to that night. Writing this out helps me process it, helps me breathe again. If there's one thing I want people to take away from this story, it's this. Always be aware of your surroundings. You never know who might be watching you. Sometimes, danger finds you simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. So stay safe, stay alert, and always protect yourself. Because I can say, with complete confidence, being armed that night probably saved our lives. Music fades in story 2. This next story happened when I was 12 years old. It was Halloween day, and my family was staying at a small family resort about an hour away from home. My parents wanted to do something different that year instead of just walking around our neighborhood for trick or treating. The resort was hosting a Halloween celebration that weekend. Games, activities, and even a haunted hayride. It wasn't a big place, maybe 10 cabins, a main lodge, a small lake, and a long open field where they set up the hayrides and carnival games. The resort was surrounded by woods on all sides. During the day, it looked normal, even peaceful. But once the sun went down, those woods turned black, and the whole place got too quiet. We checked in that afternoon, and I remember stepping into the cabin, smelling campfire smoke and candy apples drifting through the air. Kids were already running around in costumes, even though it wasn't dark yet. My parents told me the hayride would start around 7 p.m., and there'd be games before that. So, while they unpacked, I went exploring. They had booths where you could toss rings over bottles for candy, a pumpkin carving station, and even a little costume contest. Everything was decorated with orange lights, fake cobwebs, and plastic bats. That's where I met another kid, my age, named Ryan. He was wearing a skeleton costume and said he and his parents were staying in the next cabin over. We played a few games together, loaded up on candy, and hung out until families started gathering near the hayride area. The tractor pulling the wagon was parked beside a big barn. Inside, hay bales were lined up as makeshift seats. There were about 20 of us in total. The driver wore a scarecrow mask, and a few workers dressed as zombies lurked nearby, ready to jump out during the ride to spook people. At first, it was fun. The night was cool and silent, except for the tractor's rumble. Torches lined the dirt trail, flickering in the dark. That was until we went deeper into the woods. The tractor moved slowly through the woods, the crunch of dirt and straw mixing with nervous laughter. Every now and then, someone in costume would appear from behind a tree or run up to the wagon, making the kids scream before everyone burst into laughter. It felt like a normal Halloween attraction at first, but about halfway through the ride, something changed. We reached a stretch of the trail that was darker than the rest. The torches were spaced farther apart, and the flickering light barely reached the trees. The tractor began to slow down. That's when I saw him. A man, standing just beyond the edge of the torchlight. He wasn't part of the hayride crew. I could tell immediately. He didn't have a costume, no mask, no fake blood or makeup. Just a black jacket, jeans, and a baseball cap pulled low over his face. He stood completely still, hands buried in his pockets. At first, I thought maybe he was one of the workers taking a break, but something about him felt off. He wasn't looking at the wagon. He was watching me. I could feel it. That heavy kind of stare that pins you in place. For a second, I thought I saw his eyes under the brim of his cap. Dark, focused. I looked around to see if anyone else noticed, but everyone was laughing, pointing at the next zombie popping out of the bushes. When I turned back, the man hadn't moved an inch, still standing, still staring. I tried to ignore it for the rest of the ride, but my heart wouldn't slow down. When the hayride finally ended and everyone climbed off the wagon, I glanced back toward the woods one last time. He was gone. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe it was just one of the workers playing a trick. We headed back to the lodge, where the party continued. The bonfire was burning bright. Kids were laughing. Music was playing. Everything seemed normal again. Ryan and I loaded up on snacks, talking and trading candy. That's when I saw him again. He was standing at the edge of the crowd, about 30 feet away, half hidden near the tree line. Same black jacket, same baseball cap. He wasn't close, but he was watching. There were plenty of people around, so it felt strange that he'd be standing there alone. My stomach tightened as soon as I realized his head was tilted in my direction. I tried to get a better look at his face, but the lighting made it hard. I could just barely make out a short beard and what looked like a logo on his hat. I nudged Ryan. "Hey, do you see that guy over there?" Ryan turned to look. "Maybe he's one of the workers," he said. "No," I told him quietly. "He was in the woods during the hayride." Ryan shrugged. "Maybe he's just a dad." I wanted to believe that, but the man wasn't talking to anyone. He was just standing there, watching. A few minutes later, when I looked again, he was gone. By around 9 o'clock, most of the little kids had gone back to their cabins. The event was winding down, but Ryan and I still had energy to burn. We decided to walk around the resort before heading in for the night. Behind the cabins, there was a narrow trail that led into the woods. Ryan grinned and said we should walk down it a bit. You know, do something scary for Halloween. I didn't want to go too far, but I also didn't want to look like a coward. So we grabbed our flashlights and stepped onto the dirt path, laughing and daring each other to keep going. The farther we went, the quieter it got. The sounds from the resort, the music, the chatter, the laughter, faded away until all we could hear was the crunch of our shoes on dry leaves. We only walked maybe 200 feet in before we stopped near a small clearing. There was an old wooden sign nailed to a tree that read, "Private Property." We started tossing small rocks at it, joking around, pretending to summon ghosts or something dumb like that. Then we both heard it. Footsteps, slow, crunching, coming from somewhere behind us. The stranger in the woods. The footsteps were heavy, slow, coming from somewhere behind us, deeper along the path. We froze. Ryan whispered, "Probably another kid." But it didn't sound like a kid. Whoever it was walked with the weight of an adult. I shined my flashlight down the trail, but the beam only reached so far. I couldn't see anyone. Then the footsteps stopped. For a few seconds, there was nothing, just silence thick enough to make my heart pound. Then a voice broke it. "Hey there, boys." It was a man's voice. Calm, but there was something off about it. Something cold. Ryan looked at me, and I knew he realized what I did. It was him, the man from the hayride. He stepped into the edge of the light just enough for us to see part of him. Same black jacket, same hat. "What are you two doing out here?" he asked. "You like candy?" Neither of us moved. Neither of us spoke. He reached into his pocket and pulled something out. An orange wrapper glimmered in the beam of my flashlight. A Reese's cup. "I got a bunch more of these in my cabin," he said. "Come on, I'll give you some." Ryan took a step back. His face went pale. The man took another few steps closer. "You don't have to be scared," he said softly. "It's Halloween. I'm just giving candy out. I saw you boys on the hayride earlier." The moment he said that, my stomach dropped. I grabbed Ryan's arm and whispered, "Run." We turned and bolted down the path toward the resort. Behind us, footsteps. Loud, fast, chasing. I didn't dare look back. My heart pounded so hard it hurt. The path felt endless. Finally, the lights from the resort appeared ahead. I screamed for help as we burst out of the trees, sprinting toward the bonfire crowd. Adults turned, startled. We didn't stop running until we were surrounded by people. I looked back. The path was empty. He was gone. My parents rushed over, panicked. Between gasps, I told them everything. The man from the hayride, how he watched us near the trees, how he followed us into the woods. Ryan confirmed it all. My dad and another man grabbed flashlights and ran to check the trail. They found nothing. Resort staff called the police. They arrived about 30 minutes later, took our statements, and searched the area. No sign of him. No reports of missing cars. No guest matching the description. They figured he must have been a trespasser. That night, my parents didn't let me out of their sight. We locked the cabin door and stayed up for hours. Every little sound outside made me jump. The next morning, the police returned. Still nothing. We left soon after. As we drove past the woods, I stared out the window, half expecting to see him standing there again. For weeks, I swore I saw him everywhere, on the side of the road, outside a store, even once in my school parking lot. But it was always someone else. Or at least, I hoped it was. Ryan and I stayed in touch for a while. He said he couldn't sleep for days after that. The police never called again. The man was never caught. Now that I'm older, what haunts me isn't what he did. It's what he could have done. If we'd believed him, even for a second, if we'd taken a single step toward him instead of running, I don't think I'd be here to tell this story. Every Halloween since, whenever I see someone standing alone at the edge of a crowd, I think of that man. Because sometimes the people who look like they're part of the fun are watching for a very different reason. The Halloween knock. My name is Roger, and this happened to me on Halloween night 3 years ago. I'm 29 now, working a boring office job. Steady pay, long hours, and all the rookie shifts no one else wants. Back then, I was still the new guy, so I didn't get much time off. When Halloween, my favorite holiday, finally rolled around, I was actually excited for once. I planned a quiet night at home. Just me, a few horror movies, and a bowl of candy for the neighborhood kids. At the time, I lived in a small house on the outskirts of town with my girlfriend. She was away visiting her parents that weekend, so it was just me. The area wasn't isolated, but once trick-or-treating ended, the street turned eerily quiet. By 9 p.m., most porch lights were off, and the families had gone to bed. I didn't mind. I handed out candy until the crowd thinned, then settled onto my couch, half watching The Conjuring 2 and picking through what was left in the bowl. It was cold outside, but calm. One of those crisp autumn nights where you can hear every rustle of leaves. Around 10:30 p.m., I heard a faint knock at my side door. At first, I thought it was a couple of late trick-or-treaters. I got up, opened the door, and saw nothing, just my empty driveway and the wind moving through the trees. I chuckled to myself. Probably some kids pulling a prank. Trick in trick or treat. No big deal. I went back to the couch. 15 minutes later, I heard it again. But this time, it wasn't the side door. It came from the back. That door led out to a small wooden deck. Nobody ever used it. Something in my stomach twisted. The TV was off now, and in the silence, I could hear it clearly. The rattle of the back doorknob being tested. Slowly, cautiously. Whoever was out there wasn't knocking. They were checking if it was unlocked. I crept toward the kitchen, staying low. When I peeked through the window, my breath caught in my throat. A man was crouched near the door. He wore dark clothes and a cracked Halloween mask, pushed up on top of his head. In his hand was a crowbar. He wasn't trying to hide. He was calm, deliberate, like he already knew I was inside and didn't care. I backed away quietly, grabbed my phone, and whispered to 911 what was happening. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line, lock myself somewhere safe, and don't make a sound. I didn't want to risk slamming any doors, so I crouched near the top of the stairs, clutching a kitchen knife, whispering updates. Then I heard the faint pop of a window screen being pried off. "He's at the basement window," I whispered. My voice was shaking. The dispatcher said officers were already on their way. Then came the worst sound of my life. Glass cracking. He was breaking in. And it wasn't random. He knew I was home. Most burglars avoid houses with people inside. This guy wasn't stealing. He was hunting. Minutes felt like hours. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold the phone. Then I heard footsteps outside again, circling the house. And then, headlights. Flashing red and blue lights cut across the blinds. Relief hit me like a wave as the man bolted from the yard. I ran to the window just in time to see him sprint across the driveway and get tackled by police. I didn't even realize I was crying until one of the officers walked him back in cuffs. That's when I saw what he'd been carrying: a crowbar, duct tape, and zip ties stuffed in his bag. This wasn't a burglar looking for cash or jewelry. He had a plan, something far worse. The police later told me he had a long record of break-ins and that he was suspected in several missing person cases nearby. To this day, I hate being home alone on Halloween. It's supposed to be a night of fun and scares. But every time I hear footsteps or a knock outside after dark, my heart stops because I remember that night, the calm voice, the rattle of the doorknob, the glass cracking in the dark. The part that chills me most isn't what happened, it's what could have happened. If the police had been just 5 minutes later, I might not be here to tell this story. A few weeks later, the police followed up again. They told me what else they found in his bag that night: a loaded .45 handgun, several kitchen knives, and a coil of rope.